Salam, everybody. Welcome to the Samawar Network. We're happy to have you all here. The Samawar Network is a place for folks from the Afghan diaspora to come together and talk about issues that are facing our community. And tonight we have a really cool panel for everybody here. We got some new faces, some cool people that look forward to hearing from. And what we're going to do tonight is talk a little bit about what's going on in our community. We've been seeing a lot of, after the attacks in Paris, San Bernardino, the rhetoric we're hearing in our country's politics. We wanted to spend some time talking about the Islamophobia, the fear, the backlash that's been happening. So we'll go around and begin by introducing ourselves, each of us on the panel. And what we're going to do is actually say our name, where we're calling in from, and also share one word of just kind of how you're feeling right now in terms of with everything that's happening within our community, within the Muslim community. There was a video recently posted on Al Jazeera Plus that kind of played onto this, so we wanted to also take the opportunity to do that as well and give everybody a chance to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to my far left, and then we'll have everyone say their name, location, and just one word. And I'll go ahead and start since I'm on the screen right now. My name is Omar Aziz. I'm in Fremont, California, and the one word I would say for me is I'm tired. And we'll go with Afifa next.
All right, salam everybody. My name's Afifa. I'm from Southern California, located in San Diego. I'm a community college counselor, and I'm currently working towards my license in professional clinical counseling. A word to describe how I feel: frustrated.
And Ali John.
Salam everyone, I am Ali from Orange County, and one word to describe how I feel: determined.
Arzo.
Salam everyone, my name is Arzo. I'm from Washington, D.C. A word I would say describes how I feel is deprived.
Nura John.
Salam, my name is Nura. I'm from Durham, North Carolina. One word: overwhelmed.
And Reza.
Salam everyone, my name is Reza. I'm from Southern California, live and work here too. One word to describe me, I guess, is impatient.
And Sava.
Salam everyone, my name is Sabah. I'm calling in from the Bay Area. One word is uneasy.
And Sujma John.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, my name is Fojmai and I am from the Bay Area and work in the Bay Area. One word to describe how I'm feeling is optimistic.
And Soraya John.
Salam everyone, my name's Soraya. I'm in Toronto, Canada. One word I guess I could use to describe how I'm feeling is very passionate.
And Tariq John.
Salam everyone, my name is Tariq. Tyreek these days, but encouraged, I would have to say.
So thank you all for sharing just kind of how you're feeling. I know we have a kind of a wide range and spectrum of how people are feeling, from determined, encouraged, to tired, deprived. So I think we kind of represent a lot of what people are feeling right now in our community. And I think we wanted to start just by talking about what's going on and what people have been seeing, experiencing themselves, or what they've been seeing in the community. And we have Sujma John here, who works with the Council on American Islamic Relations with CARE in the Bay Area. And your role, I think, was really important, where you see what's going on a much more macro level and a bigger level, the day-to-day of what's going on. So if you could just talk about what you've noticed in the past month or so. Has the rhetoric, has the level of Islamophobia that you've seen really, has it risen? Has it been the same? What have you kind of seen in your position and just kind of your observation of what you've seen recently?
So currently Currently, I serve as the president of the San Francisco Bay Area chapter executive committee board. And as a volunteer board, we're there constantly because the staff, which is composed in San Francisco of about 6 people, we are seeing within the last month after the Paris attack, there are 29 chapters countrywide for care, and San Francisco is the oldest, and the largest is LA. So, and in Florida also. So we've been seeing tremendous amount of calls, a lot of people being fearful for their lives because of the vandalism sometimes at the mosque. There have been fake bombs left, there's been vandalism, and people have been approached and called names. So people have been very fearful. After the last week's incident in San Bernardino, we've had in the LA office, obviously they're representing the family in terms of the day in, day out. So they've been getting a large number of calls. In our office, particularly when I spoke with the directors or Abilu on a daily basis, a lot of the calls are hateful calls. You know, go back to where you guys came from, to we're going to come get you, to watch your backs. And a concern yesterday was that the staff needed security there because they were afraid something may happen. So definitely it's been on the rise. Although after the we had our November 17, we had our banquet, there was a large number of supporters there. So when earlier I said I was optimistic, is that as much as hate that we're seeing, we're also seeing a lot more support and unity amongst the Jewish and Catholic community. So just to generally answer your question, we have seen an influx, not only in the general community, but I've also seen it in schools, where a lot of the children are coming home, being called terrorists. In particular, my niece, she's half Filipino, half Afghan, and she was told Monday after the Paris attacks, oh, why did your relatives bomb the Paris concert? She immediately went to the principal, and then the CARE chapter in Sacramento got involved and came in to educate the whole school about, you know, bullying. So we're seeing it at every level, an increase, unfortunately.
And thank you for sharing that. And if anyone else wants to kind of to talk a little bit about what they've seen or what they've experienced, maybe kind of how this is different or how this feels in comparison to other things that have happened in the past, such as 9/11 or the Boston bombings, and how this compares to that and how this feels. So if anyone wants to jump in and just chime in on what they've seen or what they've personally experienced.
So I wanted to share, I guess, my experience from 2011. In 2011, I don't recall exactly what terrorist activity that occurred, but it was the Peter King hearings. The Peter King Chairman Peter King was he was the chairman of Homeland Security, and he wanted to launch a nationwide investigation on all Muslims in the U.S. They call it the Radicalization of Islam hearing, and I attended these congressional hearings, you know, alongside Congressman Keith Ellison and other members of Congress that were giving testimonies. And it was the first time I saw such deep political rift. I saw people literally referring to Muslims as a cancer from within, people referring to mosques as shrines of terror. This is a time where also the whole discussion about Park 51 was also occurring, and you had people publicly promoting inflammatory, you know, comments about, you know, Muslims, and it was happening. There was so much happening at one time, and it was this rise where it was the same fear. Everybody was scared to go out, and people that were wearing hijabs were very, very scared to fly and being in public. And I feel like we are now experiencing that wave of inflammatory comments again. And I don't know if it's going to die down like it did last time. It did ultimately, and then even with the Boston bombings, it didn't actually occur as much as I thought it would. The backlash wasn't there as much as it was in 2011. But this is exactly how the way I feel right now is exactly what occurred in 2011 with members of Congress. Like today, the House voted that they wouldn't allow anyone here from Iraq and Sudan, I believe one other country, without a visa. And so, you know, this is where you have political members actually acting on these threats against Muslims. And this occurred in 2011. So I don't know if this is just a temporary heightened fear-mongering, but I feel like we've faced it before, we faced it after 9/11, we faced it in 2011, and we're facing it now, and maybe it'll die down. I don't know, but I do think that we Muslims should take this as an opportunity to try our best to combat as much of the Islamophobia as we possibly can through efforts like Sujmai had explained, which I think is amazing. We need more civic engagement with our congressional members.
Thank you for sharing that. And from kind of what I've been seeing too has just been a lot of fear and just people feeling unsafe, and people are just not really quite sure if they feel okay going around, walking around, appearing to be Muslim. And I think when we talk about Islamophobia, we have to acknowledge that it affects everyone who just looks Muslim. It doesn't necessarily even have to be Muslims themselves or identify as Muslim. We have our Sikh brothers and sisters who are also experiencing these forms of hate. So I think that's also another aspect to this as well. And then Tariq John, I think you were gonna share something, so we'll go to you.
Sure. So, I mean, I live in California, in the Bay Area. It's very diverse. I personally don't really, I don't look Muslim. I might to some people, but here I mostly look Latin or Mexican, or with my new mustache, it's my new Sikh look. So I don't really get much of backlash. The people I worry about is some of the sisters who wear hijab. Obviously, they're on the front lines. So they're going to get most of these observations. I personally, I don't see much of it. My wife wears hijab, and she hasn't really seen much of it. So in California, the Bay Area is not as bad as I'm sure it is elsewhere in the country. So I mean, I just want to say that I'm sure the Midwest is where most of the drama is happening. We hear Texas and places like that, where you have the Midwestern American ideology that don't have Muslim friends. To me, I see this as an exciting time, a time where we're relevant, a time that gives us an opportunity to reach out to people. It gives us a time where 10 years ago, no one knew what Kandahar was, what Kabul was, what Prophet Muhammad was. No one knew any of this. So now people are talking about it at dinner. So I look at it as, while it is a negative, at least it's some publicity, and we can use that. We have to be smart in the way we interact and our media relations and how we do things, and we can turn that into some sort of positive. Make that, make it an opportunity for them to know us, to know that we are not like what they think we are. This bad view they have of most people is not what we are. All we want to do is eat a sandwich and watch some TV, Netflix, and chill. We just want to chill at home, watch Netflix, eat a sandwich. I'm trying to say, like, we have good intentions. We're normal people just like all of them, and I feel like that's what. It's an opportunity for us to show that, because people want to ask questions. A friend of mine on Facebook made a great post where he said to all my non-Muslim friends, please ask me a question. This is a time where I'll buy you dinner, I'll do something, talk to me, because I want you to know that I'm a normal person. And I feel like that's something that if all Muslims do that, it'll be great, right? If we just reach out, we take the proactive step. We go out, meet a neighbor, wave to somebody. Like, we take the proactive step and turn this negative into a positive and show them that we're normal people. You know what I mean?
I think your word was optimism, right? That was kind of your answer earlier. So I think we see that in a lot of, what is it? Encourage. So I think we see that a lot in what you had to say, what you had to share with us. So I appreciate you sharing. And then, you talked a little bit about what we can do moving forward and what some steps we can take. So if someone also wants to talk about a little bit, like for those of us who maybe haven't experienced these kinds of forms of discrimination and hate, how does that affect, what effect does that have on us? Do we still fight in this battle? Do we take a step back? What do we do if that's something that some of us have experienced, or how maybe that has affected some of us in terms of how engaged we get depending on our level of what we've experienced? And also, Sujmai John, I think you had something you wanted to add as well.
I just wanted to quickly point out, I totally agree with Tariq John about wanting to be in the spotlight, but I think that the catch to that is we're in a negative spotlight, and I think that we have to take opportunities to present that in a positive way. And, you know, Wahajat Ali, the co-host of the Al Jazeera, one thing he mentioned in some of his posts and stuff is that as Muslims, we have to create our own narratives, and we have to be able to speak our own stories. And that's where the key component comes in. Like Tariq John said, not only do we go and talk to our neighbors, but we have to be civically engaged. We have to, you know, join organizations that are promoting, you know, unity, working with other organizations. And again, I speak strictly, like you asked earlier, from our own perspective. I don't see many Afghans in those Islamic-oriented organizations to do the civic engagement, to speak for the Afghan voice. But are we talking about an Afghan Muslim voice, or are we just talking about a Muslim voice? Because there are extraordinary people all over the country, and particularly in the Bay Area, they're doing the work in the forefront of creating the positive narrative for Muslims to speak for Muslims. I don't want to see, I know, someone who has a PhD that's a non-Muslim talking about Islamic issues on CNN. I want to see a Muslim talking about those, whether they're Afghan or not. So I just wanted to point out that although I agree with Tariq John, I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done to bring the positive narrative.
And in terms of kind of what people have experienced, how does, you know, and Tariq John kind of pointed this out too, is how, you know, how does gender play a role in this particular issue in terms of Islamophobia and what we see and what people are experiencing, because I think that does play a role. So if anyone wants to kind of speak on that or touch on that as well. Nurajan, go ahead.
Yeah, I think with the perspective of women, and particularly women who are visibly Muslim, so hijab is one indicator of that. This is something that has been a part of like our reality for a long time. So I remember my mom wears hijab, and I was like maybe 4 or 5, and the first Gulf War was happening, and we live in Ohio. And we got chased down by a car that stopped and started yelling at us like, "You Arabs go back, you're causing this conflict." So growing up, I had seen this. And when I decided to wear hijab, it was a very real conversation my mom had with me. It's like, you don't just get to be Muslim. When you put this on, there are other consequences to you wearing this that will occur with this process, right? Especially because I lived in a predominantly white area that wasn't used to a lot of diversity. I never personally felt unsafe making that decision. I think it put a specific burden on me in the sense that I always have to be ready to talk about Islam, whether or not I want to be. If I'm getting on an airplane, sometimes I just want to sleep, right? I don't always want to be on discussing it. But now it's reached this point where I think, it's particularly this last year, you see a lot of conversation with Muslim women who wear the hijab saying that, you know what, I kind of do feel uneasy going to the airport today. And it's okay to admit that, and it's a tension that we have to deal with. Particularly for me, living in North Carolina, we had the death of the 3 students at Chapel Hill. I live 15 minutes away from there, right? So the reality of violence being inflicted upon Muslims has become really real, particularly in my context of where I live in my region. So I think there are gender differences. I think men face it also in a different way, particularly those who have large beards or other identifiers, or Sikh men that people perceive to be Muslim, right? But from a person who, for me, it's something I had become aware of even before I decided to wear hijab, because that was a conversation my mom had to sit down and have with me, because she's like, listen, this is the context and place you live, and these are the realities you're going to have to face. But unfortunately, those realities have become tougher as time has progressed and not easier.
Thank you for sharing. And I think a lot of times when we think about Islamophobia, we think of a lot of the really explicit forms of hatred. Someone spitting in your face, someone calling you a name, things on, defacing mosques, things like that. So if someone could speak on, Alijan, if you could speak a little bit on what are the different forms that Islamophobia takes and what we see playing out in society. So go ahead.
Thanks, Omarjan. I think it's important to recognize that Islamophobia does have a variety of different manifestations, and in all of them, whether they're soft or hard, it otherizes Muslims. To understand it, we first have to kind of put it in its context. Islamophobia is rooted in anti-black racism, in xenophobia, and anti-Semitism. And it has a long tradition of Orientalism, which was radicalized via or through the Cold War. And recognizing this is an important factor in addressing it or tackling it, because if our activism is going to be successful, it has to be intersectional. It has to address these different aspects of Islamophobia, like anti-black racism within the United States. But how it manifests is that it otherizes Muslims. It often focuses on a framework. We talked a lot about the harsh or hard aspects of Islamophobia, which is people getting attacked, people being yelled at, being accused of. But soft forms of Islamophobia exist as well, in which Muslims are seen as a homogenous other, right, as a different group that is unique. Spojmajan mentioned how she would like to see Muslim PhDs talking. Well, the reality of Islamophobia is that you can be a Muslim PhD, but the white guy that doesn't have a PhD is still an expert in your area, in your field, on Muslims in the Middle East, because the domain of knowledge is predominant, right? So that's a form of Islamophobia. Another aspect of Islamophobia is even what President Obama mentioned, unintentionally, when he said, look, you know, Muslims aren't associated with terrorists. I'm like, that's fantastic, that's great. And then he goes on, but Muslims have to address radicalism within their, or an extremism within their communities, as if Muslims are a homogenous community, as if extremism is a uniquely Muslim phenomenon. So these are ways that perpetuate this idea of Muslims as other, Muslims as different, Muslims as homogenous, and therefore can be reduced into a single group. And it's all these different forms that we need to address, both the hard aspects of it, but as well as the framing of how Muslims and Islam, the Middle East, and brown people are viewed within the context of the United States and globally right now.
Reza John?
I just wanted to add to what Ali John said. I always agree with Ali John, so I only want to add, not necessarily contradict, but I think at the root of this, and one of the reasons why I said that I was impatient, is that there's a lot of laziness coming from those who are in the majority. I saw a conversation on Facebook play out, and it happened to be between two Muslim women, actually, but one was of Indian descent, so she had brown skin, and the other was a white convert or revert, and she was born and raised in America. She had white skin. And one Muslimah, the one of Indian descent, Muslimah A, had told Muslimah B that I can't educate you about everything that is in my life with regards to race. I can't educate you about what racism looks like or what racism looks like for me. Here is where you can go to find out on your own. And Muslimah B, the white Muslimah, basically said, I don't appreciate that. I think it's on you to tell me about racism and explain to me your experience, etc., etc. And right there is one kernel, one nugget of the lethargy, the laziness that is inherent to a lot of the prejudice, a lot of the racism, a lot of the lack of knowledge that exists in places like Texas, in places like rural Illinois, in places like Missouri, where individuals do not make that effort to learn about Islam. Now, I understand that there is an onus, there's an imperative, there's a responsibility on Muslims ourselves, or as Afghans, if you don't identify as Muslim, to discuss who we are and our identity with other people. We have to shape our own narrative. That's totally on us. But at the same time, it is on those members of the hegemony, those members of the overwhelming majority community in America to educate themselves about what life is like for brown people, Muslim people, Afghans. It's not just on us, and that laziness is what makes me impatient. I am impatiently waiting for the hegemony to recognize that they also need to learn about who we are and our experiences.
Thank you. One thing I wanted to share real quickly, for people who, when we talk about what we have experienced, what we haven't experienced in terms of Islamophobia, I'll just use a really quick example for me. One thing for a lot of years, I never really, when going onto a plane, I never actually was, stopped for a long time or randomly searched, things like that for a long time. But I realized every time I was reading a book on Islam, or when I had the Quran or anything in my hand when I was traveling, I would always flip it over. I would always turn it around. I didn't want people to see what I was reading. Didn't want people to notice that. And I did that for years and years growing up. And that's that Islamophobia. Even though no one ever did anything to me, that was something that I created. That sense of fear of that I don't want people to see what I'm doing. That is Islamophobia. That is experiencing it. So I wanted to bring that up as something that for some of us to think about, because I know we've all experienced that and had similar situations when talking about how this has affected us. And Soraya John, you're here from Canada, so I wanted to kind of hear from you of what it's been looking like for you all. So I know we have kind of Donald Trump, we have all that political rhetoric going on here. So how's it looking for y'all in Canada? You have this new prime minister that everyone is excited about. So have you seen a change? What have you seen kind of on your end?
Well, there was definitely Islamophobic discrimination in Canada, certainly in Toronto after 9/11. I've experienced it as early as high school, and I'm not even a visible Muslim woman. It did increasingly worse under the Harper government. Harper openly said that Islamism is the greatest threat to Canada, and he would exploit, tragedies overseas or jihadist, quote-unquote, attacks in the West to justify, aggressive militarization and wars, and to justify, policies like Bill C-51 that threatens our civil liberties. And even during the election, just like Trump, he came off very unapologetic in his hostility towards the Muslim community. I mean, just from speaking for myself, even just a couple of years ago, a right-wing media outlet which also had some level of support from the conservative government, openly called me a terrorist for being an Afghan who is against the occupation and war in Afghanistan. They called me a Taliban supporter, a jihadist, and Islamist, none of which are true, which led to me filing a defamation lawsuit forcing them to retract their statements and successfully settling out of court. But by then the damage was already done. I went, for weeks on end, I was getting a lot of online harassment, stalking, people sending me death threats, rape threats, things like that. But speaking for myself, I've been seeing it for so long now. And again, I have the privilege of not even being a visible Muslim woman in that I don't wear a hijab. But I'm almost desensitized to it. But I'm only speaking for myself personally. Islamophobia, though, doesn't just affect people on an individual basis. It also affects the community as a whole, in schools, in businesses, between clients and people who are buying, and in neighborhoods. But it also particularly affects Muslims who are vocal politically. Islamophobia is used as an intimidation tactic to silence dissent. So these are the kind of things we've been seeing in Toronto. And even though, we have a change in Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, he's from the Liberal Party, there's still been, I don't know if you guys have heard in the news, but an increase in attacks on Muslims and in mosques here in Canada, throughout Canada. Just a couple of weeks ago, I organized myself and some other organizers, we held a rally at Flemington Park where a Muslim woman, hijabi, was picking up her kids from school, and two white men attacked her, ripped off her hijab, punched her repeatedly, beat her, and robbed her. And so the attacks haven't stopped. A lot of these former Harper supporters, they're still around. They're still angry and bitter, Islamophobic and prejudiced as ever, and they're still around. And so, you still hear things from them. And so it's important that we hold these talking heads accountable. One thing I can say in how we can combat Islamophobia is to be very transparent and talk about these things openly, to be assertive, and to make sure our allies are we have the solidarity and support from our allies. And to what I said earlier, I feel very passionate about this, but I'm also frustrated and angry because again I see like for myself, I'm always desensitized to it, but I see how it affects my friends, my family. I'm now coordinating between media and members of the community, where a teenage Muslim girl told me how she was attacked on the bus very recently by a drunken white guy. He got out on bail, and I told the media, I'm like, okay, well, here you can talk to her now. And during the rally, I was the media spokesperson, and having to deal with this is frustrating, seeing how it affects people as young as teenagers and as young as little kids going to elementary school. And but yeah, we need to be very open in talking about these things and be very assertive about it. And
we'll get to kind of some of those things that we should be doing moving forward. So thank you for kind of getting us going with that. I wanted to, Afifa, I wanted to pose a question to you as someone who, you work in counseling, you see students on college campuses, and you might be able to see, how this is affecting people in a way that you have more, maybe some knowledge on, talking about some of the trauma that we face when we're dealing with these things and how that might affect us and our health, or health or otherwise. So if you could kind of speak to that a little bit.
Most definitely. I mean, Soraya just mentioned, and my mind kind of went straight to it, was people who are younger, right? So, there are those of us who maybe were born here, raised here, and even thinking of myself, and again, because this is a very personal topic, and growing up, being in 6th grade during 9/11, that really had a significant impact on my development, on my self-identity, on my self-concept, right? There's such a huge amount of shame, that's placed onto and adopted by us, in terms of collective guilt, collective responsibility, collective blame that happens also, and kind of finding and navigating our way through that. So I just wanted to kind of really highlight that piece about identity development and how it does shape us in really significant ways. In terms of what you mentioned, is that in my opinion, it is really traumatizing. That I think one of the challenges is that as Muslims, it's almost like a dual impact, right? So the primary impact would be, right, that we, just like everybody else in the nation, are having this experience of mass shootings, of really like a loss of sense of safety, right? Because where do you go that's safe? How do you feel safe in an environment like that? But then on top of that, we have this aspect, this aspect or facet of the blowback, right? And that's kind of part of our title, right? This blowback that occurs, where we then also feel significantly unsafe because of our association, because we're Muslim, because we look a particular way, because we dress a particular way, because our names sound a particular way. And I think that really within that is part of the challenge, is where do we feel safe? Do we have a space where we feel safe? And how do we grieve, right? Because even how we grieve is regulated, right? Are we apologetic? Are we not apologetic enough? And kind of navigating our way through that is really complex. And so I just kind of wanted to draw some attention to that, and also the insidious trauma, right? There's actually a term for it, and that would be insidious trauma, right? It's actually the trauma that's incurred living in a society where marginalized people are subject to regular discrimination, microaggressions, macroaggressions, right? And I think that's one of the things that we're seeing, is that there have been waves where Islamophobia will peak, right? And in this particular instance, we see it, peaking again, right? So it's kind of going from being maybe more microaggressive to macroaggressive. It's now suddenly becoming appropriate in the dominant discourse again, right? In politics again, Muslim bashing, Muslim shaming, calling for collective responsibility and collective apologies is suddenly becoming acceptable again. And that's one thing that's not acceptable to me. So I did want to kind of just draw attention to that really in essence is the definition of a trauma, right? Is the loss of sense of safety, and I think that's one thing that I'm feeling, that my family is feeling. So just wanted to talk a little bit about that, and I can probably talk a little bit more as we go along, but one of the ways that I think that particularly applies to Afghan immigrants, to Afghan refugees, is that it builds on a lot of the trauma and a lot of the pain and a lot of the loss of sense of safety and stability that we've already experienced. And that's one thing that I see relatives and my parents going through is it safe here now? What is this going to be like in this next wave? What's going to come? Is it going to get worse? Yeah, so that's a little bit from me.
Awesome, and thank you for sharing that. And I know, like, Husna John actually said on Facebook earlier today how this can affect folks, mental health and reaching out to other people. Sorry if I froze on people. I'm not sure if that happened, but just reaching out to if it's a mental health professional, if it's a friend, if it's somebody else who we can reach out to, who we feel comfortable with. Kind of what Afifa just mentioned, making sure that we do that we're taking care of one another, that we are taking care of ourselves and our community. So I wanted to move on to discussing, President Obama actually addressed the country in regards to the mass shootings that happened. And Ali John actually mentioned, he talked about how, that there's a responsibility on Muslims to respond. So with all of this happening, what is the responsibility of Muslims? How do we respond? Do we have to respond? What is our role in all of this? So we'll take some time to kind of see what people's thoughts are on that. And Saba, I know you wanted to jump in, so I'll let you go ahead and start us off, and then switch my job over to you afterwards.
I did. So obviously there's a lot of vicious and hateful rhetoric said by politicians, and it's in response to, things going on outside of America, not just the domestic terror that we're seeing here, but also with the refugee crisis, trying to ban refugees from coming in, and there's like a and it's the politicians' way of combating hatred with hatred, which is really, really damaging, and it perpetuates that Islamophobic sentiment. So, I want to kind of address some of the things that I've heard. One, in terms of combating Islamophobia, I think number one, we really need to, when we're trying to talk about combating Islamophobia and addressing it, we need to understand the history of Islam in America. And I think a lot of times the Afghan community and the Muslim community at large forget that Islam has a deep history in America, and it's definitely before 9/11. It's pretty much been here since the founding of this nation. And Malcolm X once said that people who don't know their history, are doomed to repeat it. And so we as Afghans and as Muslims need to recognize that history and know that there was a lot of work that was done by the first founding Muslims in this country, and kind of look to the things that they've dealt with. And I don't really want to go into a history lesson here. I just want to offer that. Also, there's definitely an apologetic attitude, and it's understandable. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear for our safety when you have white supremacists kind of like parading outside of mosques, with armed, and it's pretty violent and threatening, and you have like Qur'ans that are hanging off of Islamic boutiques riddled with bullets, But the thing that I want to caution against, and I know that Tariq John pointed out, we should be proactive, and we should kind of like show, tell people that we're Muslim, and how, we are good people, and, I think that's important. But I also want to be careful that we're not going out of our way to soften hearts of, people who are bashing us. The question I'll ask is, why are we trying to appease people who might not ever like us? That I think there's more work that we can do, and we can do that work with other community groups. Like if you identify as Muslim, for example, Islam is about women's rights, it's about social justice, it's about racial justice, and so we can get involved in these different communities and be present, as Afghans, as Muslims, and kind of build a positive narrative in that way. In addition to the great work that other organizations like CARE is involved with in terms of combating Islamophobia directly. We can create that positive narrative just by being present in other communities. I would also, one of the things that I'm noticing is, and I'm guilty of it. I've experienced a lot of Islamophobia, even though I'm not visibly Muslim. It's kind of ambiguous as to what I may be. I lived in the Midwest, and I experienced a lot of it. And these recent string of occurrences has really kind of reawakened some of that fear, But I would definitely say that we have to move forward with courage, and we don't have to apologize for being Muslim, for being Afghan. We really don't have to. And you know, I know that back around Eid, some mosques wanted to cancel Eid because they were terrified of what might happen, you know, who might show up and if their life would be threatened or not. And, you know, instead, we could work with our law enforcement, our local law enforcement, to ensure that you know, our mosques are more secure and more safe from those type of threats. You know, and we need to remember that we live in a country where we are supposed to be able to practice our religion freely, unapologetically, you know. So I would say, like, our identities are intersectional. You know, I'm a woman, I'm Afghan, and I'm Muslim. And so, you know, I kind of want to move forward with my life in that way. And so I will be unapologetically Muslim. I will be unapologetically Afghan. And so that's kind of what I would say about moving forward. And I hope that others who hear this can kind of leave with that.
Let's switch my John. Go ahead.
So I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I want to repeat what I said earlier, that I'm having a hard distinction between saying civil engagement and participation of Afghans or Muslims, because again, organizations like CARE, Islamic, you know, Islamic Network groups, the Islamic Scholarship Foundation, there are various organizations, particularly in the Bay Area, that are engaging in civil engagement with the community. We have to, there are many Muslims there, but I'm having a hard distinction between saying, are Muslims in general involved and in creating these connections with non-Muslims so that we can show them that we are not the boogeyman that they make us out to be in the media. I do see it. I do see CARE working. I see Islamic Network group, which goes out to provide cultural and religious education to corporations, to schools, to law enforcement, to community members, to other like churches and synagogues. So we are seeing that. But what I'm missing, and again, I speak this for myself, and I don't know what the rest of the panel speaks. The Bay Area, alhamdulillah, has a large population of Muslims, but I don't see Afghans there. And I don't know if Tariq Jan can speak to that. And so in combating and, you know, organizations like CARE, we are there doing the civil engagements, doing the talks with the communities, holding out luncheons, open mosques for people like that. So again, I'm having a hard distinction figuring out how we get more Afghan involvement rather than more Muslims, because there are a lot of Muslims doing great work. For example, we are also seeing a lot of you know, non-engineers and doctors in the Afghan community, or particularly in the Muslim community. It was a problem that was in the Muslim community. I'm a little bit older than the rest of you guys, but not that old. When I was going to law school, I was the only one. I remember, I remember I have 4 siblings and 2 of them are physicians, but my dad was like, oh, you're just going to be sitting behind the desk, you know, what are you doing with law school? Well, I continued my ambition on my own path. And alhamdulillah, we're seeing a lot more attorneys and writers and scholars that are taking the narrative to connect and be able to speak for us. But I just wanted to end on the point that we do see all of the stuff that we're talking about. I just don't see the Afghan component as much.
Sujman, can I ask you why you think that is? Why you think Afghans are not you know, why you might think that Afghans are not participating as much within Muslim settings, engagement settings?
Well, and I'll speak for example for CARE. There's a lot of misconception about CARE. People think that they're a terrorist organization. They're associated with CARE is associated with terror organization, so people shy away. The other component that I get so one of my goals was, as president of the San Francisco chapter, was my ultimate goal, I think, was to try to draw in that Afghan connection, because on my professional side, I do immigration, so I do a lot of federal, where people are detained in federal detentions, but also there's a lot of FBI profiling. So, for example, in the Bay Area, many instances where CARE has called me to either translate or represent that person, a lot of FBI agents will go out in the community. And they will, you know, just ask questions, and then the khala or the mom or the, you know, whoever will invite them in for tea. Well, what's the role of CARE? No, you don't open the door and let them into your house. You tell them, give me your card and we will contact. And what is my goal? I want the Afghan community to know that CARE is there for them. So a lot of the fear and a lot of the things that we are seeing people in the Afghan community don't know. I don't know about Tariq John, but I can speak for myself. If I pick 10 people out of the community, Afghans, honestly, only one will know about what CARE is. It's unfortunate, but I could go talk to non-Afghan Muslims. Everybody knows what CARE is. And so what's missing, the component, is that our civil rights, our civil liberties, and our, just as you know, criminal issues are being impacted, but Afghans don't know where to turn to. They don't report it. So, you know, CARE is there to give them the resources that they need. So to answer your question, why do I think that? I just speaking for CARE, and then for other organizations, I don't know. I mean, I'm not the most religious person to say, so I don't really know how to preach to anyone else, but I really don't know why Afghans are missing. I mean, with the Islamic Scholarship Foundation, I'm the only Afghan that's on the panel, and I really want to reach out for Afghans to apply for the scholarships. No matter where I go, I said, hey, you're a high school student, you're a college student, you should think about applying to Islamic Scholarship Foundation. You don't have to be the most scholarly, it's not about that, it's about going into a non-medical field. Same thing with ING, so there are various organizations.
I just wanted to speak on, I guess, as somebody who's one of those Afghans that hasn't been heavily involved in you know, these Muslim events. So I know a lot about CARE, but I haven't been involved with CARE as much as I have been like with MPAC events, and I've only been involved with MPAC because of Otis Tareen, and that's because he's Afghan. So he did a lot of the outreach efforts, and you know, had that connection with the Afghan community. And Bushma, I guess, you know, the Afghans there in the Bay Area are lucky to have you to be the one that, you know, bridges that gap between the Afghan community and CARE. And I just think that here in the DC area, I find that, you know, there isn't that person to help bridge the gap here. We don't have that community leader that works with CARE. If there is, you know, please, by all means, you know, connect me with that individual. I would love to get involved and help. I just feel like it hasn't been promoted as heavily here, and I think if there was that platform, then maybe perhaps Afghans would feel not as hesitant to play a role. Like right now at this point, I don't know where I can plug myself in CARE's efforts, and I think that that's where I think that that's where I find why I'm not so heavily involved. Another thing is perhaps like an informational session on these resources that's being offered, and that these informational resources being offered and being educated by Afghan leaders like yourself. So I think we need more people like you, and I think we just don't have enough of that, and that's just my opinion as to why Afghans aren't as involved as they should be.
And I'm going to go ahead and move to Tariq John. Tariq John, we can't hear you right now. Can everyone hear me? Oops. Let's go. Did someone else have something they wanted to say? Soraya John, and then we'll go to Noura. Go ahead.
Okay, just until Tariq gets his mic back, I do want to add 3 quick points. One, to reiterate what Spoke John said is, yeah, I would like to see more Afghans talking about Islamophobia and taking more of a leadership role. And I think it's actually crucial for Afghans to do this, because if you think about it, I mean, Afghanistan is like low-hanging fruit for Islamophobes, particularly neocons and new atheists, to exploit tragedies and collectively blame Islam for it, when there's a strong social, political, and historical context to the current situation in Afghanistan. One example of that is when the attack on Farhanda happened. You saw all these Islamophobes coming out to you know, blame Islam, and so I think there is some responsibility on the Afghan community to correct them on the realities on the ground. Second, to reiterate what Saba said, is the importance of intersectionality and connecting to other Muslim organizations and communities, but also with the Black community and with the Indigenous community, which is what we did here in Toronto when we did the rally against Islamophobia, because they're also many of them have also been the target of, you know, racism and discrimination by the same groups of people. So it's important to have that solidarity. And the third point I'd like to make is to also one of the things we can do to move forward is to hold the media accountable. One of the things I did, I mean, in my lawsuit, what was important for me is really to set an example. So the next Muslim, the next Afghan, or the next activist who's a person of color, it won't be afraid to speak out on current issues, on world issues, out of fear for being attacked, because we live in a in a climate of Islamophobia. And I mean, I will say one thing. I have seen a shift. I can't speak for you guys in America. I know it's pretty bad with how the media talks about the Muslim community in Islam, but certainly in Canada, I have seen a shift in how the media here talks about Muslims and about Islam. Where, just a couple of weeks ago, I was on a panel on CBC talking about Islamophobia and hearing them having a conversation with me about it, whereas 2 years ago I was called a terrorist. Yet what that tells me is that they're open to have these conversations, they're open to have this dialogue, they're open to even say the word Islamophobia, and that is so crucial to have.
Sorry, John, go ahead.
So sorry about that. I don't know what the issue was. So I was just responding to Bezod. I'm not sure why she, or I mean, Sposhme. I don't know why she called me out 3 times to represent the Afghan community. But I will add as to why we aren't that big into care. Mostly it's economic. First of all, we're not the most well-off community within even Muslims. I mean, we're second generation, second generation. We're kind of just getting our feet wet in America. So, we don't have the resources to do it. Second, we don't really, I mean, even our Afghan masjids, they aren't as organized as non-Afghan masjids. I mean, I don't want to say that just generally, but I mean, what I know of, that we're just not as an organized people, mostly because economically we're all hustlers. I mean, we still hustling. All the Afghans I know, the Mo's, the Nikos, the Tonys, they're not worried about Islamophobia, man. They're out there, they're working. They don't deal with this. They don't deal with care, and so that's why I don't see them as being on the front lines or getting any real any discrimination towards them. I mean, most of them are blending in and assimilating in society, and going through. And the Afghans I do know that have, that have maybe moved up in society, a lot of them don't really network with other Afghans. I mean, that's just kind of how we are. Like, we do our own thing, because we're afraid of the haters out there. Everyone does their own thing. And I mean, my sister was president of CARE, so I mean, I understand. I mean, my own family, we've been involved with CARE, and we try to donate, things like that. But a majority of the Afghans I know are not involved with CARE because they don't have time for it, they don't see a need for it, nor are they just in a position to where they're worried about a Muslim Islamic relations. They're just, and then a lot of Afghans don't really identify themselves as Muslim first. They identify themselves as Afghan first. So it's just kind of our society and how we are. I mean, we're a very extreme, culture. We have, the most religious people, and then we have people that are completely away from the faith. So, within that broad gamut, you're going to have, and then, we're not that big of a population either within America. We're like in 3 cities in the U.S. We're in Fremont and L.A. and Virginia, New York. So we're not in major places. So our population's low. We don't have as much money, and we're all hustlers. That's just how we is. You know what I mean? So that's why we're not into care. I mean, I'm into care. I try to help out. I mean, I see Spojme at things like that. So that's all I can add as to why I don't think Afghans, and I know we're cutting me off at 90 seconds, so go ahead.
You're good. So we'll go to Nurajan. Go ahead.
Sure. I think what I wanted to circle back to was a different point. Sabajan mentioned that we have to know the history of Islam in America. I think we need to know the history of minorities in the United States, fundamentally, because this is a part and process of what has happened to other minority groups. Ali John talked about this too. It started with Native Americans, it continued with African Americans. And just to really quickly bring in, the work I do on my PhD is big survey data on Muslim political behavior. And what I find in my analysis is that the same process of role that discrimination plays in identity formation and political participation for Muslims it's exactly the same way that this has worked for Black Americans, Latinos, and Asian Americans. So what's happening in terms of Islamophobia and the racialization of Muslims is really a story tale as old as time. This is a process of America, unfortunately, and how we treat minorities. So I think fundamentally for me is knowing the history of minorities in America as Afghans, as Muslims is important, and really building that allied relationship. So being involved in CARE is important, but I would push us to be involved in other civic organizations like the NAACP and other communities as well, because this is not something that's just happening to Muslims in an isolated manner. It's happening to Black Americans right now as well. So there's other problems that we need to be aware of in this broader context as well.
Alijan, go ahead.
I was nodding my head so vigorously that I thought I was going to hurt myself as Noura was talking. Noura-Jan, you're absolutely right. I 100% agree with you. Understanding the history of how minorities have been treated in the United States is utterly essential, and it leads to the point of intersectionality, right? The only way Islamophobia is going to be dealt with is if we're intersectional in our activism. And that means reaching across the aisle. So I fully agree that, yes, CARE is a great organization. I think it's fantastic that people should be getting more and more involved in that, and I encourage people to do so. But you're right, we should be pushing beyond CARE as well. We should be working with other communities, because minorities are minority communities. And the only way that they can push back against the, to use Reza's term, hegemony, is if they work together. If Jewish communities, Muslim communities, Black communities, Latino communities, women, all these different communities join together, then they have the type of voice that that they need. I want to say one thing from a personal experience. The reason, for example, someone like myself hasn't gotten involved in CARE is I have not had exactly the most ideal experience. Not because CARE is a terrible organization. I think it's fantastic, but I think they're focused in a certain direction that not all of us are. I am first and foremost an educator. I combat Islamophobia in the academy by teaching history of Islam, history of the Middle East. And that isn't always something that works out with CARE, but I've been able to reach out with other organizations and work through them. So something that we should consider going forward is not just broadening our activism to intersectionality, but also working across fields. You mentioned going beyond the doctor, lawyer, engineer, and I think that is utterly essential to education and educating the society about Islam, Muslims, and minorities.
And I think Reza was going to mention something. Go ahead.
I think that one thing I'm noticing is that often happens in a lot of social movements is that there's, especially nowadays with how fractional everything can get with the internet, and different groups are on one side, and then there's another group talking about respectability politics in one area of the country, and there's another group talking about, no, I don't want to participate in respectability politics, I can be as angry as I want to, in another part of the country. And one thing that I often see happening is that lay people who want to get involved are thinking to themselves, which way of thinking is the right way to go? And oftentimes that gets played out a lot on Facebook, a lot on Twitter. You see people arguing with each other about the right way to be a social activist. And I think that in and of itself, the way we frame that conversation is incorrect. There's a giant table, and there are many, many chairs at that table. And you can have an angry person sitting on one side of the table and a completely calm, totally chill person sitting on the other side of the table. Remember that the civil rights movement didn't just have Martin Luther King. There was also Stokely Carmichael. There was also Malcolm X. And all three of those men worked together for the same goal. They just did it in different ways. And I think that we as Afghan Americans and as Muslim Americans are at a very, very, very crucial and very valuable point in time where the history of previous movements that have come before us is at our fingertips. And we can learn from that history. And we can understand the power and importance of involving different ways of gaining our rights. So I am happy to be the angry person at the table. I'm happy to be the chill, calm, collected person, so long as both of those individuals are at the table. So as a layperson, I encourage people to, if you don't want to hang out with CARE, or if you don't want to be participating in MPAC, at the very least, be a decent human being in front of other individuals. And that is your contribution. That is where you sit at the table. And if you want to get involved in MPAC, and if you want to sit at CARE, that is an equally valid way of practicing your civil rights and getting civil rights for other people. Remember that there's just multiple ways of going about achieving the same goal. And if we want to achieve pluralism, we must enact pluralism in our activism. So,
thanks for sharing that, Reza. That was very powerful. I appreciate it. So if we could start wrapping up, but I think there was a couple folks I wanted to point out something. So Spujman John and Soraya John will let you talk, and then we'll start going into looking at what are some practical things we can all do to work on this stuff. So Spujman John, go ahead.
So I just was kind of taken back. I wanted to clarify and didn't mean to hijack care with my comments. The utmost respect for Tariq and his family. They're probably one of the few that are very, very actively involved, from his older sister, both Hosai John and Wajma John. What I meant when I meant civic engagement was the question that was raised was, how do we combat it? And my statement pretty much meant that we needed to be in civic engagement, whether it's CARE, whether it's Islamic Relief, whether it's Islamic Networks Group, whether it's Impact, whether it's Muslim advocates. Overall, having interaction with these type of organizations, there's lack of Afghans present, and I'm pretty much involved in a lot of different organizations. Either I attend their meetings or I am aware of them. I don't see many Afghans there. So just to reiterate what Tariq John said, that money is not an issue. When you go to these events like CARES, you're not asked to donate money. You just ask if you're in the civil engagement. What I want from me and what I desire, and to end my conversation, was I want the Afghan voice to be heard within the Muslim community, and I don't see it. So again, please don't take my words as I'm advocating for CARE. We all have our views. You can be an advocate for CARE, or you can be an advocate for other organizations. But overall, in civic engagement, other than Tariq John, yourself, your sisters, a few other Afghans that I see involved, there's not much. And that's what I wanted to end that.
And Soraya John, real quickly.
Yeah, just one quick point. So I just want to remind everyone to, as we discuss these things, remember the very real problem of the inherent misogyny and a lot of the Islamophobia we see as a lot of times they target very visible Muslim women, and through this we see their hypocrisy in claiming to liberate Muslim women overseas from the barbaric, uncivilized, brown man. So there's one thing just to keep in mind, because just speaking for myself, so a lot of the attacks that I've gone that were, racist, xenophobic, and Islamophobic, one thing they all had in common is that they were all very, very sexist as well. So just to keep that in mind.
And I think one thing to end our conversation with is just talking a little bit about what are some practical action items that we can all do in our own day-to-day lives to kind of help fight a lot of this that's coming, that we're seeing. So if anybody has any ideas or some suggestions, let's just spend just a few minutes on that, on things we can do in our day-to-day lives. So Afifa, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think is most impactful, I think Reza touched base on it, is taking your seat at the table, whether that's with good dawah, whether that's supporting people in the ummah, right, in whatever way that looks. But I think that one of the most powerful things is making connections with people, not only with other communities and with other movements, but kind of on a one-on-one basis, right? I think that's one of the aspects that that helps people relate, right? That when you associate Islam with a person, when it's personalized, when you understand their story and their context and their humanity, I think that's one of the most powerful things we can do, and one of the things that we can consciously and mindfully do. But I also think that it's important to also educate ourselves and others, but also educating ourselves on the broader contexts also that contribute to extremism, that contribute to these concepts that do exist. I don't think we've really had time to address that very much in our conversation. But I think that it is problematic a lot of times that it's kind of addressed as an internal problem without really looking at the broader factors that contribute as well. And I think that's an important piece to educate ourselves and others as well.
And John?
Be an ally. I think fundamentally for me, being an ally with other minority communities is so important. For me, when these recent waves of Islamophobic attacks have happened, it's been my friends who are African American, Latino, that have stepped up and been on the front lines for issues for Muslims, at least here in North Carolina, how things are working. It has fundamentally, for the Muslims here, because we are such a small minority, been our allies that have stepped up with us. So building those relationships across aisles, and back to what Afifa John said, being literate. I think that unfortunately, responsibility is on us to know more about Islam, about our history and our communities, but hopefully that just makes us grow as better people, because people are going to be having more conversations with us whether we want to have them or not.
And Arza John?
Get involved with your local members of Congress. Recently I posted on Facebook about how I ran into Congressman Al Green. The last time I saw him was when he was defending us and our civil liberties at that Peter King hearing, the radicalization of Islam, and make an appointment with a Republican congressman who, you know, who has publicly promoted rhetoric that's contributed to Islamophobia. Make an appointment, face him, bring in a few people and say, hey, ask me questions. This is what a Muslim looks like. And I feel like, you know, while I think that having that interaction, that face-to-face interaction would really provide, I don't know, bring them some perspective as to what a Muslim looks like, and that, look, we are your constituents and we have the ability to vote for you, and I think that that's powerful. And so engage with your congressional leaders.
And Tariq John? We lost you right there. Your mic's not working, so.
Let me try one more time.
There you go. You're good. You're here. Okay. You're here.
So one practical step I think we could take is literally go. You lost me again?
You're
No,
good. You're good. You're good.
I said one step we could take is literally go to a church that's in your neighborhood. Go there during the week, talk to someone and say, hey, I'm a Muslim, I live in this community, I know many of the members here. I want to offer myself as a question and answer if you guys have it, or if you have some sort of event where I can be involved. Go as an individual, not from an organization, but as an individual. Because I mean, most of these right-wingers or things like that are from churches. I mean, a lot of them are church-based. So going to a church, literally, and maybe they'll have some sort of an event where they have people talking, and they can have you sit on the panel and just answer questions. Very simple. To know that you live there, you were born there, you went to high school there, you eat at the local restaurants, you work there, you whatever. Just so they know you're homegrown, you're here, you're one of us. That's what, to show a face, so that they don't just think of so-and-so's face when they think of the word Muslim. They think about you. Right? That's one thing you can do right now. You can, go to the church tomorrow and tell them you wanna offer any sort of services you can to speak with the youth or speak at a class they have, because they always have classes, things like that. Something like that.
And Saba, go ahead.
I don't really want to repeat anything that's been already said. Everybody's been making really, really great points. I'm going to keep this super brief. I think the common theme that I'm hearing is to have a presence and to maintain that presence in whatever sphere that may be. And so do that unapologetically. And when we do have that presence, regardless of what sphere that is, we do build more and more allies, like Noura John was saying. And I can definitely say that I want to acknowledge that I've had friends who are non-Afghan, non-Muslim, who have been stepping up and who have been, speaking out against the Islamophobic and hateful comments, directed at our community. So, and to to acknowledge when they do, when our friends and allies take those steps too, because we want to encourage that and we want to continue that. We need them just as much as they need us, and so I think that's what I would want to end that with.
And Ali, we'll go to you.
Last words. Thank you, so kind. I agree with everyone. I think these are fantastic points. Mine is really simple: accountability. Hold our own community accountable when we are marginalizing other minority groups, when we are perpetuating anti-black racism, when we are perpetuating homophobia or misogyny or any of these different things, and hold the media accountable, hold society accountable, hold politicians accountable. Don't be afraid to make people uncomfortable. Discomfort can be very strategic, and I think we need to recognize. And white comfort is not more important than Muslim lives, and it's important that we get over that kind of fear of making people uncomfortable. When we sit on the airplane, we shouldn't turn our Quran over because we're uncomfortable that white people, you know, may be slightly anxious if they see it. Let them be anxious. Let that discomfort open dialogue and make people think.
Thanks for calling me out, Ali John. I appreciate it. Sometimes we need the reminder in reference to what I shared earlier, so I appreciate that. All love. So I think we'll wrap up, and I think just also real quick to just, you know, shout out and also recognize that there are a lot of people that are doing this work and that it's not easy. And I think a lot of people on this panel are folks that are really contributing to this and engaging with people and doing some of the actions that we talked about already. And it's not easy. It's a lot of work, and first, you know, it shouldn't be a responsibility necessarily that we have to bear. But unfortunately, for many of us, it's the only thing we can do right now. So I just wanted to recognize the folks that are doing that work and shout everyone here out for making that happen. And yeah, so if anyone has any more questions, comments, or anything, feel free to engage on the Facebook event page. And thank you all for participating on the panel. Thank you for everyone who is sharing stuff on Facebook, on Twitter. We appreciate you all joining us. Feel free to contact any one of us if you have any more questions or thoughts, concerns, feedback. Keep engaging, keep talking, continue these conversations in your own communities, with your families, whoever it may be. And we look forward to seeing you all again on the next Samovar Network. Thank you. Have a good night.